Okay, hello. We are back today at 3 o'clock for a live on the Spleen Center, learning how to tap into your intuition and shed light on your fears. So the spleen for me in human design is a center that is fully lit up in myself. And I have a lot of different channels and connections going from here. And it's such an important center for us to know about, which is why Jen and I are going live on this topic, and I'm just trying to get her in. So what you're going to be learning about today between Jen and I is all about how to use your intuition from your spleen and also learn about some of the shadows that might be hiding there in our fears. And so Jen has just joined us. Jen is an amazing life coach and therapist and a specialist in human design. And I'm more on the business and marketing side. And we come together to help you understand how to use your human design to move forward in life and shed light on the human body and our energetic system.
Yes, I love that description. Yeah, the spleen is like so it does so many different things. And I was just hearing it be talked about in a different way, which kind of, kickstarted my mind thinking about it differently in terms of like the physical body. And it's not a motor center, but like it does kind of correlate with some of our energy and through our bodies.
Mm.
So it's so cool.
I really love the spleen center because I remember when I learned about it, I've always felt very intuitive as a human, very intuitive, very empathetic. And, we're not taught to really follow that intuition when we're younger. And so it was something I kind of just like knew that I had, and I used it a lot when I was traveling. I feel that was really important for me as I was traveling as a woman through Central America by myself to sort of be able to have that awareness, right? And it's an awareness center. And when we learn how to sort of tap into those everyone talks about with the sacral, we get like a uh-huh and an right? We get these yes, no things. But I feel like in my spleen, I do get movement or a zap or a zing or something,
Mhm.
shivers, right? Maybe down my spine, different things that kind of tune us into the energy and environment around us. And I'm sure that there's so many people who will be on this call who can relate to a time when they've walked into a place, whether it's a restaurant or a bar or a dark alleyway at night, or even just walking your dog at night where you just kind of, your intuition tells you something and you feel it in that split.
Oops. Seems like we've lost Mistral. Let's see if she's coming back. Here you are. Yay. Although you're not back on Zoom. You're still frozen there.
Area. And
Interesting.
so I really love this area.
I was
Okay.
here. Okay, now we're back. I was hearing someone talking about the Mercury retrograde shadow is like way worse than actual Mercury retrograde. So
Is
hopefully
that what we're in
that's
right
it.
now?
No, we're out of Mercury retrograde, but we're still in the
Oh,
shadow for like another week, I think. So, but I'm glad
okay.
we're here.
We'll blame that on our technological problems.
Right.
Um, so Jen, can you relate to some of the things that I was just sort of talking about with the spleen and the intuition and the fear that comes from that sort of area and our knowing around that?
Yeah, and I love when I see different human design experts talk about a distinction with the emotional authority, like we both are, with having a defined spleen or not, because the defined spleen, that hit of intuition, is fixed and reliable when you have it defined. So, in a way, it can really like amplify and amp up your inner authority if you are so if you have a defined spleen and you're a sacral or an emotional authority, right? Because the authorities work on a hierarchy. So it's really important to know if you have a defined spleen or not, and how to really harness the intuitive hits that are there. And yeah, I mean, for me, not having a defined sacral, right? It's not that gut hit, but there's just like I always think of the spleen as the clairs, whether it be clairaudient, clairvoyant, clairsentient, whichever one is really strong within you. But I have definitely been places where I get a hit of intuition that's like, this is not okay, or something's funky here, whatever it's telling me that, I've really had to practice listening to it, right? Because it's a hit and then it's gone. So I
Yes.
love to be stubborn. And I hear that hit and I'm like, ha ha ha, nuh-uh, like, let me test you. Well, let me tell you, I'm wrong every time. Like, my intuition always right. So it's really been a cultivating practice to really listen to that, and not only listen to it and hear it, but also actually like follow the directions, listen to what it's telling me, because it is always in my best interest.
Yeah, 100%. And when you talk about listening to it, I want to say for me, it is a feeling. I can feel it. But I think that's kind of what you're saying too. It's just like that we're not used to following that guidance that we get from our body because we're told to think logically, like, oh no, I need to be here because this is where I'm meeting my family for dinner, or I need to like walk down this dark alley to get to the place I need to be. And it's like, well, really, no, we don't, and understanding that intuition is so important and so key because it does give us that guidance, like we were saying, of like, "Oh, I shouldn't have," you know, I don't know. I had a client once, this is a funny example, but she was like, we were talking about her spleen and being defined and tuning into it. She's like, "Last night I went to this restaurant and I just knew that we weren't supposed to eat there, but I ignored that hit, and then she ended up with food poisoning the next day," right? So it's almost like sh her body already knew just based on the environment that was there, the smells, the taste, the energy that was surrounding it. Her body knew that. And when we ignore what our body is telling us, that's when we find ourselves getting stuck in situations that, in this case, it's food poisoning. But so she's stuck on the couch, right, for the next day, and that doesn't feel nice. And so how we tune into that is really understanding what our body is sending us. What's that signal? And like I said before, for me, sometimes it's like shivers or your hair sticks up on end, or I get like a distinct feeling on that. For me, it's like, well, for most people, it's going to be on that right hand side of our body, lower body, that gives you that sort of sense of like a zing or a zap. And then I actually notice too, as I've been on my human design journey, and I'm wondering if you can relate to this, Jen, is that I actually get, because my spleen is connected to my root and also my sacral, that I actually can feel energy move almost from my spleen to that other energy center. So it's almost like it's an instinct of telling me something. And I haven't figured out exactly what that means yet, but I've noticed that. And I'm like, whew, I wonder what that means, whether it's a rising or falling, or if it's just the way my body is speaking to me.
Well, I think of the solar plexus being on the right. So our spleen is actually on the left, but I've also read that, and right, how true this is, that the splenic center does not have a correlation with the spleen, which
Mm.
I don't know. Because I talked to a splenic manifester one time who said, I believe she was a splenic manifester, um, that lower left side of her body, like where the spleen is. I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong. And if anybody on here is a doctor, please let us know, knows their anatomy. Um, when she got a really big intuitive hit of yes, that section, yeah, like lit up. It was on fire. And that's when she
Wow.
knew, okay, like my spleen is telling me yes, my authority is giving me the go ahead, this is an aligned decision for me. So absolutely, we can, I feel like, you know, the centers on the body graph do correspond with our body. So of course we're going to feel it within us, and depending on our channels, we're going to feel that flow, especially if it is conscious, because then we can be consciously aware of it. And when the centers get to work together, right? For reflectors, this is why you just kind of have to sit back and sample and wait a month. But for more of us who have definition within our bodies, the lower body, we really get to feel how it consistently works and get to
Mm.
know it. Because I feel like someone, well, not I feel like, I know, someone with an undefined spleen, right? It's not fixed and reliable. So they're going to have heightened states of intuition, but they might not notice these things that we're talking about because we work in these ways. We get to experience, yes, we experience all the different clairs, but usually there's one or two that is so heightened that we really get to know. That's why I say I hear it. Mine is more of an inner knowing. Like I know my higher self kind of like
Mm.
speaks to me. I don't actually like hear a voice. It's more of like an inner voice speaking to me. So I've had to kind of
Mm.
learn like where in my body does that come from?
Yeah. And I think that's really key to come back to, as well as reminding everybody on the call, like just because I feel it a certain way or Jen feels it a certain way, like it really is coming back to your body and how you read those signs and what those signs are telling you. And I was just speaking to a client now who's has a very defined spleen, even more so than I do. And I was like, how's that possible? Because mine is so defined with all these channels and gates lit up. And she was just like, "But I don't get those hits. I don't receive them." And a part of it, I believe, this is someone new I'm just working with, is that she hasn't learned how to tune into that yet, right? It's something we haven't been taught, so she has to learn what those signs are and what her feelings are that she gets around it. But like you were saying, it's kind of where all the clairs come from. She has to then is it that inner voice, or is it an actual feeling, or is it an actual what would be another one, like a taste, almost. Like I've definitely had a client before who was like, I can almost taste when something is like foul and I shouldn't be in that area. I can like taste it in my mouth. I get this like bitter, like kind of grossness about it. And so it's kind of learning, like, what are your ticks? What show up for you when, and then following the advice, like you said, like following what this is trying to tell you. And when it comes to just life, but also business, this is how, as a part of not your decision making process, but a part of tuning into what is right and what is wrong for you.
Yeah, and it just dawned on me, like, of course, we're having this conversation about the body and where we feel it because the spleen is all about body consciousness. Like,
Mm.
that is what it is aware of. So, all of these pieces, it's so helpful to really understand how your spleen works, but also bring that body awareness to notice what's flowing because the spleen is all about well-being. Like the spleen wants us to survive, right? It's about instinct, about
Mm.
survival. So of course it wants us to survive, but it also wants us to thrive. It wants us to be really well in all of those senses, have a full existential life. It's about that spontaneity and health. So like our spleen is rooting for us, and when we can really listen to it and notice it and not ignore it, follow it, is when we can really be led, right? It can lead us to that alignment.
Yeah. So I would sort of think about, like, with my spleen, I loved how you just said about the when we can really, it's like rooting for us, right? And it's also like our instinct, but it's also, oh, what was it that you said? Well, it's also the fear too. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our shadows and fears that come up, but there's something else that you just said that was really good that I wanted to talk on. And I think that it was, what was it?
Spontaneity, existential
Spontaneity,
living.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, because that was something that as a manifesting generator, I'm very
Mm,
spontaneous and I would follow cues, I believe now when I look back,
mhm,
from that splenic sort of like, go do this or go do that or try this. Even though it's not my authority, I would feel like that spontaneity of coming up. And I always was, people were like, you're too this spontaneous, you have to stop and think about what you're doing and the
mm.
decisions. And a part of my decision making is emotional. So yes, I do many times have to tune into that and understand that. But there's also that when I'm being spontaneous, I can follow that splenic motion of whether this is a good choice or a wrong choice, right? Because my spleen will also guide me to understand that as well, which I think is also really important to note.
Yeah, I think it's super important to note about the spleen, especially if you have a defined spleen. If your spleen, that triangle on the left side of your body graph, is colored in, that it comes as a hit. Like it'll hit you in whatever sense, in whatever way, and different parts of your body graph will tell you what sense. Like is it that taste? Is it that feeling, that sensation, inner knowing, all of that. But if you don't heed that hit, if you're not aware of that hit, or if you're just like, oh, whatever, oh, I didn't really think about it, that didn't happen, it's gone and it's not coming back. Like it is there as the instinct to let you know how to survive in the moment.
In a moment.
And then it goes away because another one might come in.
Yep, that's true. And I remember talking to someone who had splenic authority and how she said she could, felt like she could just make decisions instantly. Like, again, she just
Mm,
knew straight away if something was right or was wrong. And even in someone who worked in corporate and not so much in a business, but more in corporate, of understanding, like, she knew like this person was not good for the job. We need to fire them and get
mm.
somebody more like this, or we need to do things like this.
Yes.
And she would tell her boss, and her boss would be like, well, that's too fast. You're making these decisions too fast, too this, too that. And of course, lo and behold, 6 months later, he was fired because that wasn't the right fit and that sort of thing. And so it was really interesting to have her tune back into the fact that I can make those decisions quickly because I have that splenic authority and because I can sense it and I just know. And yeah, I just know. And she's like, I've never made a decision that wasn't correct. And because she's just naturally followed her authority, which is a beautiful thing. But then at the same time, when you have people telling you that you shouldn't or can't or won't or whatever, it does make it hard to tap into that a little bit more. And I'm sure you've had a client that's probably had something like that before too, where they've experienced that and then kind of been turned away from following that instinctual nudge.
Yep, absolutely. I've worked with a lot of splenic projectors, and really, there's a lot of deconditioning that has to happen because exactly what you described, society tells them, oh, how could you know that? What proof do you have? And the spleen doesn't act like that. It's not connected to the ajna, the mind, the head either, really, unless, I mean, maybe you have a unique chart where you have a lot of channels that do connect it, but still they don't work together in that way. So there's so much conditioning that can happen. Yeah, one of my splenic authority clients, we discovered because of her circuitry, it was very individual. All of her circuits were individual, so it worked on a very individual level. And when she needed further guidance, like, yes, she had to honor in the moment and really learn to trust her instincts and intuition. And that was part of it. But for the bigger pieces, it turned out that it happened for her through dreams, that she had to really
Mm.
ask a question, what is the guidance here? And her intuition came to her through dreams. That's where things were revealed. And she kind of would wake up in the middle of the night or in the morning with these aha moments like, oh, here's the answer. So, yeah, it works completely different for everyone.
Yeah, and I think that's what's can be challenging because it feels very overwhelming for people, but really just bringing it back to the basics of just learning to in the situation, if you feel something that is like a feels like a warning or a trigger or something that's popping off to sort of just note it and see what it's telling you and practice following that so that you can have some data then from it to say like, oh yeah, that was smart because maybe this would have happened or maybe that would have happened or maybe you know exactly what would have happened had you been in that situation. So I think that's really important just to come back to just like tuning in to that intuition that we have that's telling us yes or no in the moment.
Yeah, and especially for me as a 3-5, like, I had to make mistakes and reflect on all the mistakes, all the times that I really should have listened to my intuition, to my spleen that was guiding me in the moment, and I didn't, and I made a mistake. And, I always love telling the story of how decided to play with this because it got to a point where I was like, "All right, I have this gift, but I'm really struggling to listen to it in the moment." And, for whatever reason, whatever season it was, I started noticing this around my water glasses, around water. I would get this intuitive
Mm.
hit of like, you're going to spill this water. And, 3-5, I was like, no, I'm not. Let me put it here. It'll be fine. Spilled like literally 10 times. So then I started playing with it and I would hear that and I would pause and I would be like, okay, did I really hear that? Okay, I did. It's telling me to move my water. This is not a good spot. So let me move it and let me remember to check in after, like, is water spilled everywhere? Is like it's still in my glass and everything's okay? So this really kind of became a game that I played with myself, but it was super helpful because I really got to feel and know in my body what that felt like so that after practicing it for a while I would be able and still now because I still do this, I put my water glass down and I'm like, is this safe here? And now I know the hit of my intuition of, yep, this is okay. Or no, like this is not okay here. You need to move it elsewhere.
No, I love that, and I think that's really funny because I get those hits with my kids, and I sometimes I do ignore it, like, don't give this to your kid like that, or whatever, and then if I ignore it because 'cause I'm just in a rush, boom, plate lands on the floor or something like that, and I'm like, "Ah, I knew that I shouldn't have done." Like I knew it and I ignored it. And so it's like kind of funny, like you can play with it in those sort of safe times, right?
Yes.
Safe times when it's just like kids or water or whatever. And so then you can learn to really trust it when you're in sort of area, more things that might be more challenging or dangerous, like around water with your kids, like actual ocean water with your kids or different things like that, or just people in general. But
Right. Yeah. I was happy to play with a glass of water rather than walk down a dark alley, like you mentioned, and be like, how's my intuition working? Like, no, no, thanks.
right. Let's not practice it there.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit quickly about the sort of the fears and the shadows that might come up, because this is also something that's important. So we get these intuitive hits, but we also, this is sort of the place where we hold our fears of like, um, I think of some of examples for me when I was first starting my business are really around like, am I good enough? Can I show up for this? There's other people out there already doing this, which I mean, some of this has to do with the heart center too and worthiness, but I think a lot of it comes from those fears of um, like past fears of like when we've remembered something like I don't know, your face looks funny or your smile looks funny or your voice is funny. And then it kind of lodges there and we get this fear of then showing our face or of then speaking out or of then having a point of view because of that one time somebody shut our point of view down. Um, and so I know that was, even though my center is so defined here, I actually am still working on a lot of deconditioning around this center because of those fears that I have from my past, essentially.
Yeah. And I think I've been talking about conditioning so much lately, in my own world, on my own platform. So I want to call attention to kind of the two big ways that we get conditioned, especially when we're talking about the spleen. So one of those conditionings that happen is in our defined places, right? Where we have fixed, reliable energy, we can fall into a lower vibration in a shadow. This may be due to generational trauma. This may be due to our own trauma. Maybe somebody said something to us that shifted that energy and we've been stuck there in that lower vibration. We're not fully using it as a gift in its highest vibration. So that's one way to look at your conditioning, is look at all your definition, all the gates that are defined there, and see, am I falling victim into the victim energy? And I know last time we did this live about the spleen, I had shared, which I will again, on my Pinterest, about victim patterns of the gate. So I will definitely share that in my stories after, or DM me for that link and I'm more than happy to give it to you. And then the other way of conditioning is where we're not defined, right? Where we've absorbed someone else's energy and are holding on to it, mistaking it as ours. These are often our shadows because we're not looking at it, we're not aware of it. So we really need to look at the whole area. So just to give you an example, I don't have gate 18. That connects the spleen to the root. I have gate 58. So gate 18 is more of one of my shadows. So the victim energy here with gate 18 is fear of judgment, really being fear of what people are going to say of you, judge you.
Mhm.
Um, Consciously, no, I don't care what anybody thinks of me. But like deep down, and how it plays out in my business sometimes, like, ooh, I don't want anybody to like not like me, yet I'm a double projector. And like everybody's gonna dump their stuff on me that's theirs, and I'm not for everyone, and that is okay. But this shadow, this fear, this conditioning of judgment can come up. So I need to stay aware of it so that I know that it's there, kind of be aware, am I feeling judged here? Okay, that's something that I don't need to worry about. I don't have that energy for it. Let me just let it go and release it all together.
Yes. Okay. I also have gate 18 not defined, and that fear of judgment is huge for me. And so definitely living in that shadow and worrying. And when, like you said, like consciously, I'd be like, no, that doesn't bother me. But it's the unconscious side below the layers and the fears of that that actually then oftentimes define the choices that we make and how we show up, right? Because it's our ego protecting us,
Right,
even
it's
when
that
consciously
sub
we think.
right, it's our subconscious beliefs. Like we all have negative cognitive negative beliefs, and usually these shadows are feeding into it, or have even taught our subconscious beliefs that this is what's going to happen. I've seen proof of the negative, not looking at the positive at all, because that's not how the subconscious works.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's really important to know. And a part of our chart too is that we didn't really talk about this much, but we do have a conscious side and we do have an unconscious side. And so even though um, our spleen might be defined and have, gates or channels that are activated, some of those gates could be in our conscious or they could be in our unconscious. And so there's also a sort of this whole unconscious that just affects us in ways that we have yet to comprehend until we bring those into the light and kind of make sense of them and learn to say, okay, thank you, no longer interested in having you here, goodbye.
Yeah,
um
and my spleen is unconscious. I have one gate that's conscious and unconscious. So there's like a little bit of consciousness there. But that's
yeah.
why looking at my human design and learning about my energy was so helpful because I saw all of these things that were unconscious. I had no idea about them. But once I started bringing them to my conscious awareness, could see, wow, like this is keeping me stuck. This is getting in my way. Let me hone in on these gifts that I have here to really help me align.
Yeah, yeah. I'd love to know in the comments if anyone has been looking at their chart and sort of going like, "Ooh, yes, mine is defined or undefined," and these are some of the things that it's coming up after watching this because I know it's a lot to learn about and it's a lot to even just like learn how to tune back into our intuition, but understanding it and starting to dive into it can open up so many opportunities for us in our life with which way we want to move forward and what's the right thing for us and how we and obviously it's a part of this bigger system, but it's a huge piece because it is that the instinct, the spontaneity, and the intuition, and the fears.
Yeah, right. There's a lot here. Like I feel
There's a
like
lot
this
here.
this center, like yeah, it gets talked about with spleen and instinct and intuition, but like it's not a center that gets talked about a lot. And I don't have, oh, do I? No, I don't have the statistics in front of me. But I think it's somewhere around like 20%. Maybe like 15 to 20% of the world has a splenic authority. Like it's not that rare,
Yeah.
in retrospect.
Which means it should be better known about, right? Because people should be tuning into that and understanding that. And I don't know if you've heard this at all either, Jen, but I've heard people who have undefined splenic centers. So that might just mean that your center is white or not colored in. You may have some gates activated there, but I've heard that people who have that undefined center are actually really good at channeling information to us about intuition and about those unconscious blocks. And so finding, if you have this defined splenic center like Jen and I, it's almost like finding someone who has the undefined center who can help you channel some information about it. And that they're really
Yeah.
good at sort of having those intuitive hits come through and understanding like the clairs. Have you heard
Yes.
that the difference?
Yeah, I've heard the same thing and also share that same information when I do readings with people with an undefined spleen because they can be highly intuitive, right? It doesn't come consistently, but you still have this energy. And when you like I mean, you do amplify this energy, especially with defined spleens, but like you can receive so many intuitive hits that sometimes it can be really overwhelming because if you don't know what's going on, if you don't have the energy to like move that because it is undefined, it can be a challenge or can cause you to shut down, to reach for substances. The other huge piece with an undefined spleen is that you can be really, really sensitive to what word do I want to use here? To like man-made substances like certain medications, certain
Mm.
pharmaceuticals that are like lab created. So I have worked with many undefined spleens who say, I took this and it was awful. Like my mom always tells me about a medication she took for hormone balancing that made her feel like literally her brain was on fire. So undefined spleens really need to try like natural methods, whatever natural route you want to go, herbs, teas, Chinese medicine, essential oils, like whatever that will be. It's much softer on your system and your system can handle it and integrate it, where if it's something from somewhere else outside, like your body doesn't know how to process it.
Oh, that's really good information right there because I'm sure someone right now can go and be like, "Oh, look at my chart. What is," if they know that they sort of struggle with this and go and then take action from that. So that's really cool. Whew, I feel like there's so much we could talk about with the spleen. And at the same time, the spleen is one center, right? It's one center in your human design chart. And there's so many other ways to talk about it when it's connected or it has channels to other centers. Is there anything that we kind of want to close on today that we sort of didn't touch on that would be important for people to know about other than just
I
learning how to tune into it?
I think just finishing that statement that you were making, like there is so much to the spleen because it connects to four different centers. Like that's a lot that it can actually five. I forgot that it
Five.
connects to
Yep.
the heart. So
Heart.
five,
Yeah.
like that's crazy. I mean, mine alone, well, actually it doesn't really connect. It only connects to one. Like, oh, I got a lot of gates, but no channels, just that one. So yeah, I think yes, we really, that's what I've been saying to everyone today. We really kind of got to zoom out, look at the whole chart. There's so much information here. Yes, look at your spleen. Yes, decondition. Yes, hone in on your awareness and practice your intuition and how it works for you so that it can guide you in whatever way that it can.
Yeah, beautiful. And then, of course, Jen and I have a lot of different ways that you can work with us. You can DM us directly if you want to work one-on-one, but we also have a lot of free resources available to you to help you dive deeper. And we have this really amazing planning by design coming up. So if you're an entrepreneur who struggles in sort of maintaining a good schedule, goal setting, setting intentions for your business, Jen and I are opening up a membership that'll be launching next month that will be helping you sort of ground into all of that and have some accountability around this goal setting, along with some worksheets and workflows that will help you just land it so well.
Yes. Yes. And the
Yeah.
wait list is open now. So if you're curious, if you're like, I want in, if you have a defined spleen and it is giving you that yes hit, let us know and we'll give you the link to get signed up.
Awesome. Otherwise, join us next week. We'll be talking about our last energetic center for the human design until we restart again, which is the root center. And that's going to be really fun to chat about because it's all about grounding in and understanding this pressure that we oftentimes have or don't have, depending on whether our root center is defined or undefined. And we'll be talking about that next week.